Lesson 34. We continue with the philosophy of the Kleshas. Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, Chapter 2, Sutra 9. Abhinivesha is the strong desire for life which dominates even the learned or the wise. This is the last one, the final station. Comforting language from Patanjali. Fear is only human. He says that even the learned or the wise suffer from fear. Everybody suffers from fear. And to be honest, if you see, then you realize that fear is a condition that most people are living in, basing all their thoughts, decisions, mainly on fear. Subconsciously, we do this subconsciously. Every problem would be solved if we were not functioning subconsciously, but that is the problem that we are facing here. That's why we need to bring it back to Vidya. Fear makes people lose control, panic. For example, when fire breaks out in a cinema or a nightclub, regularly you see in the news that something like that happens. Many people die. If you read carefully, you will find out that most people didn't die from the fire. Most people died from being trampled by people who panic. Panic is fear. Fear of death, literally. And when confronted with a situation, like a fire in an enclosed space, a nightclub, a cinema, people stop thinking rationally. They start acting like wild animals trying to survive. If only they were yogis, they would stop, stand still for a moment and ask themselves, where is the exit? Because if everybody would just go to the exit, most people would be safe. No people would get trampled. People get trampled because people start running around like crazy, not to the exit, but just not even knowing where they go. We can become so irrational and so insane as a result of fear. The fear is an incredibly strong force to be reckoned with, to be respected also. I have noticed, and I think you will notice too, or have noticed already, or will notice somewhere down the road of your development, you will find yourself in situations where people panic, and you ask yourself, why are they reacting like this? You gain or remain. You remain in a condition of calm that allows you oversight. And because of oversight, you don't panic. You just very mathematically deduce, what do I need to do in this situation? you forget that in the past you would have panicked in a situation like that too. But you have, without realizing it, without noticing it, you underwent a transformation, part of which is that you are allowed to stay calm, remain calm, calculating even, in a situation where other people lose their wits, other people lose control. Even the learned or the wise are dominated by fear. Patanjali specifically uses the word domination. Play with fear also. I mentioned in the handout halfway down of going to the highest springboard in the swimming pool. I've done something else to play with my fear. I have jumped off the highest springboard in the swimming pool. I've done a bungee jump also. Have you ever done a bungee jump? Have you? So when I was in my 20s and practicing yoga already for a couple of years, having practiced Hapkido, teacher had left, so I started having room. So I started focusing on my brothers who were battling addiction. And in the summer, I would take them to southern France. Remember, I told you the story about the old man talking about the war. So we went there a couple of summers, and my oldest brother went with us also, so four of us. I'm the youngest of those four. The oldest brother not battling with addictions, so the two in the middle. We tried to take them away from the environment where they cannot control themselves and abuse drugs and alcohol and what have you. The first week you are in a tamas condition. Do you recognize that when you go on a vacation? Not a vacation where you travel around all the time. We would go to a camping in southern France on the Mediterranean, camping on the beach in fact, and just stay there for a month. So the first week you're in a tamas condition. So all you do is just enjoy nice food and the sea and just sleeping, but then you are fully rested. Naturally, you want to start. Energy wants to manifest when it's there, so you start exploring the surroundings. You take the car and you see that in the distance there is a mountain, so you just want to try to get to the highest point you can get. On the way you visit, you pass by beautiful old small villages, what have you, and we ended up in a town where they had a carnival, a fair. There was a fairground, which once a year, every village once a year has that festival. They come and you can shoot and you can take some rides and what have you. I saw this installation where you could do a bungee jump, and I was immediately intrigued. So I wanted to do that, but was confronted with fear. You see what is happening there, and you think, "Oh my God, what if that rubber band? You call it a rubber band? What if that rubber band breaks? You're gonna break your neck. You're gonna smash to death." Anyway, we were walking there, and I said to my brothers, "Hey, let's go do a bungee jump." And they all immediately dismissed the idea. They immediately said, "Oh, I'm not interested." That's also a way to deal with fear, just not acknowledging it. But I couldn't stand it. I just couldn't stand not facing the fear. You will do so too as a yogi, I'm sure you will. Cannot avoid that when you're in this process. But that was a huge obstacle. And so it took an eternity. I don't know exactly how long. When you're in such a situation, a minute seems like an hour. But it took at least an hour, probably more, for me to come to the point that I went to the cash register, bought a ticket, and actually went up to jump off the platform. There's a whole psychological warfare going on in your mind to get to that point. You negotiate with yourself. Yeah, what if it breaks? You die. Yes, but statistically, how high is the chance that it breaks? Very, very small. Just like people are afraid of flying, more people die statistically from just walking, crossing the street, than people die in air accidents. And yet, instinctively, we are more afraid of dying than crossing the street. Anyway, it was very liberating. And I'm not saying that you should do a bungee jump, but what I'm saying is try consciously to play with your fear, because it will be a huge step forward, it will lead to a huge breakthrough in your development. And it will lead you to eventually become that unique person in a crowd that is panicking, that stays calm, oversees the situation, and then will just do what is necessary to get out of danger. I wanted to take another bungee jump because I'm sure that it would have been much more enjoyable the second time. The first time was, of course, very scary, but it was too expensive, and I was not so wealthy at that time, so I didn't do it the second time. But very interesting experience, breakthrough, I could say. To overcome fear, in another way, I did it in a very diplomatic way, negotiating with myself and rationalizing everything that could possibly go wrong. To overcome fear, you can use anger, hate, like we saw with the bully sergeant. Then you just put your foot down and you say to yourself, what the hell, you're not able to do this? What a softy are you, what a pussy are you, you're a coward. Of course, better to negotiate and come to a reasonable solution, but in case of an emergency, the strong person is the one that puts the foot down and says, hey, come on, you gotta do something now. So you can use this when you are with other people and people are frozen by fear, in fear, but you can apply that to yourself as well. So you reduce fear back to hate, which is the previous klesha. You go from the final station back to the previous station. Hate should not be an end goal, because it is only a tool here. Hate in itself is poisonous, is not something that you should live with also. So when you find yourself with anger or hate, here you have used it as a tool, but many people live in anger or hate because of relational issues. A boss that is forcing you to do things that you don't want to do, or manipulating you into jobs that you don't want to engage in. Kind of sabotaging what you had envisioned for yourself. Or relationships on a personal level, personal relationships. Many people are filled with anger as a result of relationships, professional or personal. When you're dealing with yourself, you try to bring it back to the previous klesha, which is attachment. And you do that by showing some compassion, some empathy, which is what psychologists or psychiatrists do when they are counseling people who are in distress and full of rage, anger for what happened to them. So first, to help you out of your anger, you use empathy. Attachment, basically. You show love, show appreciation. Attachment, just like anger or hate, is also not the end goal, because attachment makes dependent. That can indeed happen with a psychologist, but it can also happen with a student, or with your own child, or with in any kind of relationship, including with yourself. You should not stay in that condition also. So you have to then bring it back to egoism. You go from fear to hatred to attachment to egoism. The one before the last one, when you go back up the ladder. And you do that with the realization that it is time to do it yourself again. It's time to stand on your own again. In case of the bully sergeant, he will give you your red beret and assure you that you have passed all the tests and you are ready. You are a man now, you're ready for battle. You qualify, you're good, you're done here. Next time for the next stage. In case of a psychologist, a psychiatrist, or a teacher, there is this time that you need to give support, compassion, understanding. But at some point, the student or the client needs to move on, needs to fly out, needs to become independent again. Not dependent, not attached. So you bring it back, and eventually, of course, you end up back to avidya, which now, because of the process that you have gone through, is vidya, knowledge or wisdom. The way that this is presented seems like a static process. You go through the process, all the problems are solved. Unfortunately, I think I mentioned it last week also, it doesn't work that way, because there are many other situations, new situations that you find you're in, where before you know it, you have descended down that ladder again. And you find yourself, after months, sometimes years, you find yourself stuck again in fear. Basically stuck and paralyzed. For a yogi, it is the misery that comes out of this that will wake you up and walk back the ladder back to vidya again. This is how you mature, this is how you develop more insight, become wiser, more experienced. It's what happened 2 years ago when I decided to take a break. I had become stuck. And the dogs help me to walk back the ladder. And I learned a new lesson in life. In the end, back to Vidya, the cause of all kleshas, the cause of all suffering in life. So it's something, it will happen again. I will get stuck again, probably, somehow, some way, at some time. But as a result of you going through the process various times, you become more and more skillful at detecting faster, recognizing sooner that you've done it again. The first time that you realize you got stuck is after 30 years since you were born until the moment that you are aware of this, maybe because of this class. You realize where you are at, stuck, paralyzed. So the first time takes decades. Then you've done it once, realized, brought it back to Vidya. Next time it will take maybe 2 years or 3 years. Going through the whole process, the next time it takes only a couple of months. And so you come closer and closer to the essence of where it goes wrong, even to the point that you anticipate descending down the ladder again in a certain new situation, and you step in before it even comes all the way down to getting stuck in fear. You become more experienced, you become cleverer. Sutra 12. We're missing Sutra 11. Somebody has Sutra 11?
Yes.
You have? Strange, why I don't have it. Okay, their active modifications are to be suppressed by meditation. That is a very important sutra we should not skip. Meditation, meditation, meditation. It's the answer to everything. If only you have the discipline to sit down, close your eyes, and breathe in silence. All insights, all problems are solved in that silence. I remember very clearly throughout the years, especially before I came to Korea and was still in training with Ajita, life was a roller coaster in a way, trying to find my way. And every time I had conflict, every time I felt stuck, lost, failure, I had always the same conclusion. I need to meditate more. Because every time I was in class with Ajita, I had these epiphanies, these insights. Every time that I had the discipline to practice, there were no problems. Because problems only occur because you don't see. But when you meditate, you automatically start seeing. Not with your physical eye, I'm not talking about your physical eye, but you start seeing complex issues. You start seeing cause and effect in a very natural way. But it's also human to not be very disciplined, even though you know that it's what you need most. So what do you do then? You go to Korea and you become a yoga teacher. Just kidding. No, try to find more and more moments of silence for yourself. It's incredibly powerful. It costs nothing other than a little bit of time. Patanjali hits the nail of the head with Sutra 11. Meditate. I think in Sutra Patanjali makes a distinction between kleshas that can be reversed back to their origin, and according to Patanjali, those are the less severe kleshas. Severe kleshas, according to Patanjali, have to be dealt with through meditation. The process of going back, bringing them back to ignorance, doesn't work there. You need to meditate more. Sutra 12, the reservoir of karmas which are rooted in kleshas brings all kinds of experiences in the present and future lives. Can you follow that a little bit? The reservoir of karmas which are rooted in kleshas brings all kinds of experiences in the present and future lives. We are all a ball of karma. And to understand this sutra, you have to assume that there is a possibility of reincarnation. You don't have to believe that, but just assume that it is possible. That you had previous lives. And will have lives in the future. You will be reborn. Your spirit will move on and take on the shape of another physical body. According to Eastern philosophy, every spirit, you are a spirit after all, every spirit has to go through the same experiences in life. And what you don't experience in this life, you will experience in another life, or you have experienced it in a previous life. If you're a little bit into spirituality, you notice sometimes that there is talk of old souls and new souls, old souls and young souls. Old souls are people who have lived through many reincarnations, therefore have had opportunity to live through much karma, and therefore are much evolved as human beings. Young souls have not had that opportunity to live through much karma, are therefore less evolved, and you can see the difference between various people and categorize them as old soul and young soul. Young soul makes many mistakes and has to suffer a lot still. If you see that and understand that, you want to help, and you become very frustrated because there's nothing you can do. You try to help, and the moment you turn around, they make the same mistake again, and they just continue blundering and colliding and just making mistakes and suffering. Old souls have lived through so much karma, processed, purified so much karma, they are naturally very stable and free from all these naive mistakes and leading to upheaval, conflict, and what have you, suffering. there are several things to keep in mind. Never compare yourself with other people, but also never be judgmental about other people. Don't be judgmental about the people that seem to be simpler, stupid, less experienced, but also do not admire or worship people who are more evolved and therefore achieve things that are unachievable for you at this stage. You simply, if you understand this, you simply have to go through more experience to get there. And it might not be in this life that you will get there. And like I mentioned before, we're all the same, all from the same source. We're all brothers and sisters. That comes back here because we all have to go through these same experiences, face the same obstacles and challenges. So when you see somebody struggling and being very challenged, show some sympathy, show some empathy. You may have been there and done that. Other people still have to go through it. But do not think that you are better or wiser, so it's not happening to you. It has already happened, or it is going to still happen. Once you realize that, your heart opens up. Show some sympathy, some empathy, compassion. Because in the end, we're all the same. We all feel the same pain. We all feel the same joy. We all have to go through the same obstacles and challenges. The sutra goes into, the text under the sutra goes into purification aspect. It's the last sutra also, so we can elaborate a little bit on that. We have talked about Atman, self, which is your true self, your true characteristics. Because we are lacking vision, insight into what we are beyond our skin and bones, beyond our superficial identifications, most people really are not aware, conscious of their true characteristics, their true self. When you practice yoga regularly, fairly regularly, a purification process takes place. You start connecting with your true essence, with your heart's content. And inevitably you will start following the directions of your heart's content. This will lead you to all kinds of experiences that confront you with your conditioning, your karma, all experiences that you had that have left some skaras in you that determine how you act and react when triggered. In the earlier session, I talked about liberation. Liberation occurs when you know the expression, in English it says, not being able to see the trees for the forest. Correct me, please, because I think I'm totally messing it up.
Forest for the trees.
Forest for the trees. We're going to use the metaphor of a forest here. You climb to the highest top of the mountain and you look over the area and all you see a sea of green. I think I've told you this story before. You see a sea of green. Nothing distinct. Just a sea of green. That is the condition of most people. In their ignorance, that is what we see, is just a sea of green. I'm a human being, that's it. I'm Dutch, from Amsterdam, yogi, hapkido, Korea, what have you. Cheese, windmills, tulips. Yoga is like a cleanup operation. Literally, the word purification is used many times in yoga, and you really do, unknowingly, end up in a purification process, a cleanup process. And the metaphor of the forest is very interesting, because you become a gardener, and you start cleaning up the forest. You see a sea of green, which is trees and brush and weeds and what have you. So you start cleaning up. You start with the forest floor. You start cleaning up the brush and the weeds and what have you. That's all the not so big karma, not so important karma. All the brush and the weeds, the small stuff. Next, you start to clean up the smaller trees. Now, when you go back to the top of the mountain and you look out over the valley, you more and more start seeing shape. Like you start gradually developing an idea, not concrete yet, but you start developing an idea of your true characteristics. So you go back to the forest, you keep cleaning, you keep clearing away growth, the smaller growth, and in the end, when you go back to the top of the mountain, all you see, all that is left is 5 of those huge redwoods. You know what a redwood is? It's sequoia. It's the biggest tree in the world. Every time I see a photo of a sequoia, I'm so impressed, so in awe. It's just amazing that a thing can be so big, so huge, and so old. That is the karma that you are dealing with. That is left. That is your core, your essence. Most people cannot see that because it is polluted. There is so much growth, undergrowth, brush, and weeds that you cannot see the tree for the forest for the trees. You cannot see the sequoias, which are huge, beautiful trees, but they are just so much surrounded by other green, it just disappears in the mist of all that green. So you've cleaned that up. That is the process every yogi is in. Your daily life is your playground, and you will soon see that Patanjali says it exactly like that. Your daily life is your playground in which you just continue with your life. Don't pretend to be a yogi or anything or distinguish yourself. Just live life, but with a new quality of observation, quality of consciousness. And you automatically, little by little, clean up all the pollution. Because all the samskaras, all the memories that is stored inside you in the memory, the data, the impressions we call samskaras, will come to the service of your consciousness. And they come especially to the service of your consciousness when, going about your daily life, they're being triggered by normal daily life situations, in your interactions. And because from now on you do that consciously, you process them, and you gradually they lose steam. Gradually they lose their strength to influence you, to determine the way you act and react. Because there are many of them, it is a process of years, but more and more you start to see those beautiful sequoias. So when I'm saying that I feel to some extent liberated, it's because most of the undergrowth, the brush and the pollution is gone. And those sequoias are left. Can you make any sense out of this metaphor? Yoga talks a lot about purification. And if you don't understand what it is about, it just seems like another New Age phrase, another mysterious concept that, you know, sounds nice and interesting, but it doesn't really apply to my daily life, does it? But it really does. And the purification takes place before you even realize it, simply because it is purification is put into action naturally as a result of your increase in consciousness and sensitivity, which is a natural result of your standing still in silence, physically and mentally. So yoga practice is a very powerful tool that leads to that new quality without you even realizing that it's happening in the beginning stages. A very powerful tool that leads to very considerable changes, transformations. Another thing, when you get purer, you get more misery. Does that make sense? You would think you get less misery. In the end, yes. But when you get purer, the misery that is left stands out more. If you have a bucket full of misery, let's say, although it's maybe a ridiculous visualization, but you have a bucket full of misery and there are 2,000 pieces of misery in that bucket. You're just miserable, like most people kind of are, just miserable without realizing it, because it's just daily life. That is how it is. So yoga in New Age circles is always being associated with happiness, joy, health and wealth and what have you. And people very superficially portray to be happy and joyful. But as a result of your yoga practice, without faking it, you do become happier, more joyful and healthier. Because you get rid of the things that make you miserable. Now, if you're always used to being miserable, you don't notice being a little bit more miserable today than you were yesterday. But if you start getting used to being more and more relatively happy, joyful, being in higher spheres, higher spirits, the moment that you get hit by misery, it hits you 100 times harder than it did when you were polluted, or than it does other people. That is why we call it a disease of the disciple. Because all people on the spiritual path will be confronted with that increased sensitivity, causing more misery when it strikes. Many yogis, especially in the beginning of the process of transformation, become temporarily emotionally unstable. I would almost use the word insane, but jokingly. But temporarily emotionally unstable. And this is why. Because you become more conscious and sensitive, because you do process the misery leaving you more and more with positive condition, positive emotions. Look, you have conflicts on a daily basis, right? Most people do. And you just go to sleep, and the next day you wake up and time for another conflict. As a yogi, you have no conflicts anymore. But when you get a conflict, it totally messes you up. And you don't go to sleep and wake up for another day, you can't sleep. Your head is messing with you because of what happened. You are much more deeply affected by what happened. For sometimes, I have noticed if I end up in a situation where a samskara is triggered in me that makes me very angry, I'm not myself sometimes for 2-3 weeks before I'm relatively sattvic again. 2-3 weeks. If I really explode. What does this mean? It means that you must avoid exploding from now on. It's not acceptable anymore that it's just part of daily life that you go from conflict to conflict. It will happen. And you just use it as a learning moment. To be more alert next time. If you can avoid situations where that happen, or to anticipate when it is happening, that you step out of it before it actually triggers the bomb to explode. But it can happen while you drive and somebody cuts you off and start honking the horn and middle finger up in the air. Something like that can cause so much anger in you that for days you're just off, you're off balance. Normal people, they just scold back and honk back and they push the accelerator and try to cut off the other person. They start to battle. And they're proud of their achievements, maybe. For me, it's just, if I allow that to happen, I'm afraid my heart will stop beating. Can't do that anymore. Be aware of this, because diseases of disciple are called the diseases of the disciple because we're not aware that it's happening. And for a large part, not 100%, but for a large part, you can avoid those trapdoors simply by being aware of it. So next time when it happens, you immediately recognize it. Then smile. When you recognize it, just simply smile. Don't be too serious. Not smile a stupid smile, a smile of recognition with a vow to be more alert next time. But remember, the world is your playground. We will come back to that next week. Patanjali says it in a sutra, maybe using other words, but the world is your playground. With the emphasis on play. Play with the most deadly serious issues in life. Try to, you know why this is important? It sounds very frivolous and childish. The moment you start taking things serious, your energy gets blocked. There is no inspiration inside anymore. You get stuck. As long as you play, energy circulates and you are sharper, more alert, wiser as a result of that. So the question that why are we so serious that we, to the point that we get blocked? That is because we label things good and bad, serious and not serious. As yogis, we have to label things simply as experiences that help us grow. If you can approach it in that way, things that we used to label negative or bad become, in fact, a positive. And that will allow you to be more light-hearted about things, avoiding the blockage. And when you really get stuck, then you find a film of Mr. Bean on Netflix or YouTube to unstuck yourself. Questions? Heavy stuff, huh? Okay, let's have a short break.